Mr. Secretary, I was over at a gathering this morning over at the Wilson Center focused on the Arctic. And it's always a good day when I can start my day in Washington, D.C. talking about the Arctic. When I look at the budgets, not only within Interior, but the other subcommittees, I'm always looking to see where have we, as an Arctic nation, placed the priority, the funding priority, in our budgets to work towards whether it's greater access to the Arctic, whether it's better understanding and working with our indigenous peoples. And a couple questions for you this morning about where we are on some of these Arctic-specific initiatives. And let me start first with polar bear co-management. Not too many of my colleagues get to talk about polar bears, so I think it's an important one. And I had an opportunity to speak with some folks this morning just exactly about this. In the FY17 omnibus, we included report language related to the creation of a civil-based co-management regime for polar bears. Back in November of last year, the service published proposed rulemaking related to polar bears. It had two purposes. First, it solicits public comments on developing and administrating a co-management partnership with Alaska Natives, and it also asks for preliminary ideas as the best method to ensure that take limits established by the Polar Bear Bilateral Commission for the Alaska Chukotka population are not exceeded. My understanding is that meetings on co-management between the department and the tribal governments were scheduled to take place in early June. I understand that these meetings were canceled by the department. I need some understanding this morning as where we stand with the co-management regime, what the time frame is for this proposed rulemaking, and then further making sure that I have your commitment and that of the folks within your department to work with Alaska Natives as we implement the treaty to ensure that decisions are being made on reliable scientific information, including incorporating the traditional knowledge from our Alaska Native people. So just an update on the co-management situation with our polar bear.
Well, I certainly appreciate and support that Alaska is different, and Alaska both has strategic, has economic, and cultural value. In regards to the Interior Advisory Committees, is that I have 220 committees, and so I suspended them all until the different advisory committees could give me who is on their board, what they've done the last year, what they've done the last 5 years, and their mission statement. Once I have that, then I'm glad to unsuspend them. I just want to know what I'm responsible for, and if they had a meeting, that all they had to do is ask for an exemption on it, and I'll see whether this particular board asked for an exemption. But if they had a critical meeting, there were Acadia, there were some of them that had a meeting in June that was coming up. They wanted a meeting. Then there was a process in place that they could ask for an exemption, and we'd give it. But since I'm responsible for 220 boards, I just want to know who's on the board and what they're doing, which is a part of that.
And understand that. Also recognize that this is a bilateral commission that we have in place with Russia. So as we talk about how we can better involve our Native peoples in the co-management, this is something that is important not only for the polar bear. We have other commissions as they relate to management of other species, whether it's walrus, whale. And let me bring up the issue of walrus right now. As you know, our Alaska Native people have hunted walrus for centuries. The meat is a critical part of diet. The skins are used for skin boats for hunting. The tusks are turned into works of art, and literally, it's the revenues that are derived from selling the ivory that allow so many to be able to either buy food, pay for their energy, put fuel in their boat so that they can continue hunting. The previous administration instituted a near total ban on domestic commercial trade of African elephant ivory. I want it clear for the record, we have no African elephants in Alaska. We do not engage in anything that has to do with elephant ivory. Unfortunately, what has happened is there has been unintended negative consequences on the Alaska Native arts economy. We have had some states that have put complete bans on any ivory because they apparently are concerned that you can't recognize walrus ivory, fossilized ivory. I'm wearing an ivory bracelet. I've got ivory earrings on, all from walrus. But some states have said we're just going to avoid purchasing any walrus ivory, and it has been wrongfully confiscated at some airports around the country. This is an issue that for many, many of our Native people is really very, very concerning. And at our AFN convention last year, there was a roundtable conducted specifically on this issue. On top of all this, the service is required to make an ESA status determination on the walrus in fiscal year 17 because of a multi-species settlement agreement that the Obama administration entered into in 2011. So I need you to commit to working with our Alaska Native leadership to educate Fish and Wildlife Service personnel on the need to treat elephant ivory different than walrus ivory. And I'd ask that you consider, I know you're not a big fan of working groups right now. I understand the review that you're on, but if you could look at forming a working group on this issue to ensure that our Alaska Native artists are able to continue the sale of these important artifacts.
Absolutely, and the ivory ban applies only to the African elephant. I think we'll look at a secretary order to clarify the position and be
That would be
glad to
great.
help you with it. On co-management, I am an advocate of co-management. I think a lot of the Native Alaskan tribes, and my brief introduction with them, certainly have a culture of managing the species up there. Bear's ears is another example. I think I'm an advocate for co-management, and part of the request was to have Congress authorize it. My understanding is that I don't have the authority to authorize co-management, but you do. But I would be glad to help work with you in any way I can on legislation, certainly give our support behind co-management. I think that's an appropriate path.
Thank you, sir.